Hi, thanks for joining us today. This video is a tutorial for the beaded geckos that we made in our recent live virtual Crafternoon program for adults. So if you weren't able to make it to that, or if you did and you want to have some instructions now to refer back to, here you go. This video is for you. So for this project, the minimum supplies that you're going to need are at least 31 beads in one color, color A. Today I'm using this blue color. And a minimum of either 25 beads in a second color, color B, or 23 beads in a color B, and 2 beads in a third color, color C. You're also going to need a length of string or thread that will go easily through each of your beads at least twice over. 3 times is better. How much thread you're going to need is going to depend on the size of the beads that you're using. If you have bigger beads, you're going to need more thread. Today I'm using 9mm pony beads to demonstrate, and my thread is about the length of my arm span plus a little extra for good measure, so maybe 2 yards or so. More than that can start to get tangled up as you work and just generally be kind of a hassle to deal with. You'll also need a pair of scissors to cut your thread with as well. Other supplies that you don't need to have, but that are super helpful if you do have them, are going to be a beading needle. This is not required at all, especially for larger beads, but it can be really helpful if you're working with smaller beads. I'm going to use one today, even though I'm working with larger beads, just to be a little visually clearer so you can see what I'm doing. I also have today a safety pin and a little bit of tape to hold it, and I'm going to use those to anchor my work while I'm working on it. You totally don't need those at all either. It's just useful if you have them. So I'm going to start here by taking my thread, and I'm going to find the center of it by pairing the ends together and folding it in half. And then I'm going to make just a little knot there so that I have a little loop at the center of my thread. I like having this loop because then I can string my gecko on a jump ring or what have you later on when it's finished. And then I'm also going to use it to anchor my work, so I'll put this safety pin through that loop so it's nice and secure, and use my little piece of tape to just anchor that safety pin to the work surface like so. There we go. Now that's going to hold my project steady. Next, I'm separating my 2 threads. Now, when I make these geckos, I like to work from the tail to the head of the gecko, but once you've got the technique, if you prefer to work it in the other direction so that your loop is at the gecko's nose instead of at its tail tip, that's totally fine as well. So, of course, you can use any colors you like, but today my blue color, color A, is going to be sort of the main body of my lizard, and then my yellow, color B, will be an accent color to that. And color C, the pink, I'm saving for the eyes. If I didn't have a color C, I could use 2 more color B beads for the eyes, but the pink will stand out more, which I like. So I'm going to start with my accent color, and I'm going to string 2 beads in that color onto the thread on one side of my project. Doesn't matter which side. And then I'm going to alternate colors a little bit, so I'm going to do blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue, yellow, and finally 2 more blue. There you can see them all in a row. 2 color B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, A. Now I'm going to switch to the other thread. If you're using a beading needle, you might want 2 beading needles, or you'll want now at this point to switch your needle from one thread to the other, because now we're going to go back through the way we came, but with the other thread. So this first thread is going through in this direction already. We're going to come back 1 bead at a time in the opposite direction. We'll pull that through. Now it doesn't matter at this point if it's perfectly neat because we'll be adjusting it later. The same with the second bead. The first thread came through this way. We're going to go through the other way. And we're going to keep going just 1 bead at a time until only the last 2 beads in your color A are left on just your first thread. So this part is the tail, and now we need to start making the gecko wider. So these 2, instead of going back with the thread 1 at a time, we'll do them both together, like so. And at this point, I might like to sort of neaten this up, make sure that the tension is not too loose. It doesn't have to be perfect because it'll keep working itself out a little bit. So now I've got to just sort of up to the gecko's butt, and now we're going to do its back legs. So to do that, we're going to take one thread at a time. And onto the thread, we're going to thread 2 blue beads and 3 yellow beads. So 2 color A, 3 color B. And we'll go ahead and pull the thread through those. So now once again, we've got a sequence of beads that are strung onto just one thread. But instead of jumping over to the other thread and bringing that through in the opposite direction again, we're going to backtrack with this same thread that we're already using. So I'll separate my yellow beads a little and let them hang out here and skip right over them and go back through the blue beads the same way I came before, but in the opposite direction. And when I pull that snug, that loop of yellow beads becomes the toes of the gecko. So now we can set that thread to the side for a minute. That leg is done, and we'll jump over to the other thread. Because at this point we need to do the other leg before we can continue. So I'm going to do exactly the same again. 2 blue beads, then 3 yellow beads. And I'll come back through just the blue beads with the same thread, leaving the yellow ones on a loop. All right, so now we've got the gecko's back legs. You can switch your beading needle back to your right hand thread, or you can just leave it. For any beads where both threads are going to pass through in opposite directions to each other, it doesn't matter which thread you string them onto first. So here I'm going to get the beads for the gecko's body laid out in roughly the order that I'm going to string them on, but then they can pretty much all go on at once in one long line on the thread. So we'll end up with a string that goes 3 color A, 1 color B, A, B, B, A, B, B, A, B, A. So at this point, I'll switch my needle to the other side again. And just like we did with the tail, we're now going to go back the way we came through each row of beads. So take the first 2 beads in this string. The first thread came through that way, so now we're going back the other way with this one. We'll pull that snug. Now you're going to take the next 3 beads, blue, yellow, blue. The thread came through that way, so we'll go the opposite way, pull it snug. Next, we're going to do 4 beads at a time, blue, yellow, yellow, blue. You don't need to pull these rows super tight so that the beads start to bunch up or anything. You just want them to be laying right next to each other without too much wiggle room, so we'll pull that snug. Then a second row of 4, blue, yellow, yellow, blue again. And then these 3 final beads, blue, yellow, blue, just like so. Here we've finished the gecko's body, and now it's time for another set of legs. I'll start with the thread that still has my needle, and just like for the back legs, for each front leg I'm going to string on 2 blue beads followed by 3 yellow beads. And I'm going to skip over those yellow beads and go back with the same thread through the blue beads and pull that snug. Then I'll switch my needle over to the other thread and do the other leg. So 2 blue, 3 yellow, skip over the yellow, back through the 2 blue. If you're strongly right or left-handed, the top and bottom sides of this project are exactly the same. So if you're having a hard time doing the legs on one side, there's no reason you can't just flip the entire gecko over and do it with the same hand, if that's easier for you. Alright, so we're up to the neck of the gecko here. The rest of the beads will be for the neck and head. We'll string them on in the order 4 color A, color C, A, C, then 3 color A to finish up. And at this point, I'll go ahead and switch again which thread my needle is on. So here we're going to do the same technique as we did before for the tail and the body again. We'll thread back the way we came through the first 2 blue beads here, pull it snug. The next 2 blue beads will do the same. Then a row of 3, pink, blue, pink. Then 2 blue. And then finally the last blue bead all by itself. Alright, so there's your gecko fully assembled. Now, to finish it off, you can either take your threads and just tie them right over left, left over right in a square knot and trim off the ends. Or I like to weave the threads in a little way back through the gecko and tie them off someplace less obvious, like sort of under the arms here. If you're working with very small beads, your gecko might be kind of trying to bunch itself up like this. And if you weave your end threads all the way back through the entire gecko, that can help it to lie flatter. So if my gecko is bunching up, I'll sometimes weave my threads back all the way through to the tail tip and then back up the tail and tie them off right here in front of the back legs. But these are large beads today and my gecko is lying flat just fine. So I'm just going to weave back through the head and tie off under the arms, and that will be plenty. So I'll just hold its nose steady with my fingers and I'll go back through the second row here. Make sure you're not going back through the very first row at the tip of the nose, or you'll start unstringing beads instead of weaving in your ends. The gecko will try and undo itself a little bit as you go, but that's okay, just hold it steady. And we'll just go back row by row here. You don't need to go back through the legs unless you want to. It works, you can, but you don't need to. You can just bypass the front legs and go through the next row here. Just make sure you don't accidentally leave any thread tangled up in the legs if it catches it as you go through. Before I tie off this first end, I'm going to weave the other one through as well so that I can even the tension out a little bit first if I need to before I tie off. And it's exactly the same process here with the other thread. Now that I have both threads woven back through as far as I want them, I'll just tug on them gently and see my tension is nice and even. There aren't any beads at strange angles. I don't have any large loops of thread coming out anywhere. So at this point, and for this part as well, you can use a beading needle or you cannot. Either way works. But I'm just going to lift this whole thing up here for better access. And I'll get my needle in through under here, and I'm just going to tie it off in a plain knot around this thread that's already part of the structure of the gecko. I'll tie that nice and tight, then once again for good measure. And then I'm actually going to flip the whole thing over and do exactly the same again on the other side with the other thread. So now our gecko is all tied off. But if you cut too close to your knots that you've just tied, they could come undone. So instead, I like to thread the ends back through this same row again before I trim them. Now that's far enough away from the knots, so we'll snip off both ends, and there you have it. If you've been following along and making your own as you watch, now you have your very own beaded gecko. If you've made a medium or a large one, they can be fun on a keyring. Or if you've made a very small one, you maybe want to make another and turn them into a pair of earrings. Whatever you feel like doing is great. Either way, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this project, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and or joining us for our next Crafternoon program. You can find out more information about these and all our events for adults, kids, and families and teens on our website at aloalibrary.org/calendar. See you next time.